And we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, and thank you for joining us for the final workshop of this special series, Mysteries of Accessibility. Today's presentation will be focusing on recording audio and video. Welcome back to many familiar names that I see. And if this is your first time, thank you for joining us. We have all the past sessions recorded, as well as the materials to go along with those, and I will follow up with you with a link to the blog that contains all of those. My name is Danny Shapiro, and I'm on the marketing team here at Hawks Learning. Our speakers are once again, Crystal Trapani and Kristen White of Old Dominion University. Kristen White is an instructional technologist with the Center for Learning and Teaching at Old Dominion University. She's the university's lead Zoom trainer. Kristen has been an integral part of ODU's transition to remote teaching during COVID-19 and continues to develop and facilitate faculty support on topics including Zoom, Blackboard, VoiceThread, Kaltura, and other instructional technologies via workshop, consultations, video, and support documentation. While building online interactive activities for faculty, she has noticed an absence of basic accessibility knowledge and does her best to inform and educate others on how to make content accessible for all learners. Crystal Trapani is an instructional technologist with the Center for Learning and Teaching and an adjunct instructor in the Department of English at Old Dominion University. Crystal has crafted tech-forward activities in her composition courses over 12 years. She blends her experience working with first-generation and non-traditional students, curriculum development, creating interactive and accessible online course content, and training and mentoring faculty in order to help them achieve positive student outcomes and success. In working with faculty, she helps her colleagues gain strong working knowledge of how to make course content successful for students of all learning abilities. Crystal continues her commitment to teaching so that she can share that personal classroom experience with faculty. Thank you to you both for being here once again today, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Danny. All right, so this morning we're going to talk to you guys about recording audio and video. And so we're actually going to start the slide deck with a bit of a refresh in case somebody's new and they haven't been to the other ones. So if you've been to the last several, just hang tight. And so when you start thinking about accessibility, it's not about disability at all. Accessibility is about the ability and making things easier for everyone. Odds are you rely on things that are related to accessibility in your daily life. So when you go to the grocery store and you walk through those automatic doors, when you leave, you take your cart to the curb cart to go to your car. If you're watching a movie, you might use subtitles to not disturb somebody. And if you've ever used your speech to text on your phone, you're using the accessibility tool. And everyone in your course should benefit from your course content. Things you should, you want to consider visibility, and it includes people who have no vision or low vision, and they might be using screen readers or high contrast settings or magnifiers, and document structure helps those individuals. Audibility includes those who have low hearing or no hearing, and narration or video is often difficult for those individuals, and you want to make sure you're adding captions and subtitles to your documents. And if you're doing a presentation, you want to make sure you've got that sign language interpreter because you don't know who is hard of hearing in the audience. Mobility includes both physical mobility, which would be loss of range of motion, and electronic mobility, which is the ability to review documents across multiple devices and have them appear the same no matter where someone's looking at it. And finally, cognition, which is the mental action and process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through text, experiences, and the senses. And what we're talking about today is actually going to include all of these. And so it's important to recognize that accessibility does help everyone. We've got our table that talks about situational and temporary circumstances where students would benefit from accessible content, even though they may not have a permanent visual, motor, hearing, or cognitive disability themselves. Our students are very stressed out now. It's finals for a lot of institutions, and that's impacting their cognitive ability. Any institution that receives federal funding is required by federal law to maintain and provide accessible documents. Section 508 requires institutions to provide accessible content to students of all learning abilities, and it aims to make websites, web apps, electronic documents, and software accessible to everyone. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 Level A and AA are explicitly referenced in the Refresh 508. And any content you deliver to students in a digital method, such as Blackboard, Canvas, Google Drive, any LMS, email, it must meet 508 standards. And accessibility doesn't have to be a mystery, and we'll talk today about how to work through making your recordings accessible.
So as a review, we're just going to quickly touch on some of the items we talked about in our last workshops. In the speaker notes of today's actual slide deck, there are links directly to the presentation and handout folders, as well as directly to the Hawks blog that also has those items. As a refresher, the first thing that we have on the list is document properties. This is going to help ensure that you can help your students identify and search for documents. Headers or slide titles, these allow the reader to easily navigate through the document. Text formatting, there's many things here. The size for your slides should have a minimum font size of 24 points. Font serifs are the decorative tails and strokes that stem from the letters. If something is sans serif, it doesn't have those tails. Sans serifs are slightly more readable than serif fonts, generally speaking. You want to make sure that there is a clear distinction between letters when you select the fonts. So an example would be Arial's technically accessible again, but it's hard for some individuals to read letters like the lowercase L and differentiate it from an uppercase I. Also, there is not a best typeface or font identified. Some people believe that sans serifs are better for screen reading, while others feel that serifs are better for print reading. Either way, you should aim for simplicity in your font for the most readability. Your font should use simple, familiar, parsed fonts. Avoid complex characters such as cursive scripts. You should avoid ambiguous characters such as a font where a letter O and 0 are similar, or a letter C that's nearly closed and might look like a letter O. You should limit the use of the number of fonts. Every time you swap a font, the reader has to adjust their reading pattern. You should consider spacing and weight. Fonts that have little spacing between letters are hard to read. So cool may look like cod if the letters are too close. Additionally, fonts that are very light can also be difficult to read. Ensure that you have sufficient contrast between text and background and avoid small font size. The use of all caps. When you are using all caps, the screen reader is actually going to read out those individual letters versus reading the word, and this makes the content inaccessible. When you are using abbreviations, it is important to first identify, or it's important that you understand that if you identify something such as a month, such as September, and you abbreviate it as SEPT period, it will actually be read out loud as SEPT by a screen reader. Acronyms, you must provide both the full spelling of the acronym or meaning prior to just using the acronym in your document. For example, if you're going to abbreviate FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the first time in your document, it should say Federal Bureau of Investigation, parentheses, FBI. Special characters. Screen readers cannot read several special characters. You should never use a special character in place of a bullet. You should be using the built-in formatting. Underlines should only be used for URLs. For users with color blindness or low vision, they may have trouble distinguishing links from regular text without the underline. Font color. Color alone should never be used as the only indicator of emphasis or of meaning. If someone has color blindness or low vision, they may not be able to ascertain the information. The use of descriptive active text links. When you include a link in your text, it should have descriptive text versus the long URL to help provide context for users using a screen reader. Built-in formatting. If you're including a table or list, you must use the built-in formatting in order to help screen readers identify that table or list is included. Also, for PowerPoint or slides, you want to use master slides when you begin formatting your slide deck. Color contrast, difference between the background color and foreground color. Your background color is the color that is on the page. So a Google Doc or a Word document would start with a white background, and the foreground is the color of the text or images on top of the background. So it usually defaults for Google Docs or MS Word to black text as the foreground color. Alternative text. This is going to provide an alternative way of conveying information or context of non-textual items such as images, and this is going to help those that are unable to see the image itself. Element and object reading order. This is important to identify the order in which the items should be read from your slides. Animation. Slide animations can be distracting at best and inaccessible at worst, and potentially cause seizures and catastrophic scenarios. Slide transition animations often distract individuals who are typically able. For students with various learning differences, the animations may cause them to lose focus or have difficulty navigating the slide deck. Additionally, the user should always be in control of advancing the slides. Slides should never automatically progress. So now let's talk about recording itself. The first item we have is chunking the material. Using a lecture that you've used many times in a synchronous face-to-face course in a physical classroom won't work for a recording without adjustment. Students have a lot of distractions around them when they are working remotely. These distractions may be something as complicated as a child to minor distractions of additional browser tabs. Material should be chunked in 5 to 7 minute segments, and because student engagement greatly decreases after 6 minutes. Two very relevant studies would be the Guo et al., which found student interaction or attention quickly wanes after 6 minutes. And that was a very large study reviewing 6.9 million student interactions on videos. Additionally, Berg et al. Found students find videos integral to learning, and they prefer videos that are under 15 minutes in length. But this is the key. Additionally, students leveraged closed captioning, even though none of the students in the study had an auditory learning difference. So that's a huge thing, and we're going to talk about SRTs being required, but it's going to help all of your learners. Lecture skills and setup. When lecturing, don't just read your slides. Students will nearly instantly tune your lecture out. People read much more quickly than you speak, so your students will read your slide and quickly ignore your voice, or they're going to be competing. They're trying to listen and read at the same time. So they have the dual channel that it's competing as they're trying to read and listen at the same time. If you are using a slide deck, you should provide your students with a copy. This helps students who are accessing the recording on other technologies such as a tablet or phone read what's on your slide. You should be adding to the content that's on your slide versus reading directly from them. The 7x7 rule is that you should have no more than 7 lines of text and no more than 7 words per line on each slide. Your students should be able to identify everything on that that is on that slide in 5 to 7 seconds of the initial exposure to the slide. Have a script prepared. This will also help you edit your closed captions if you plan on posting your video for students to peruse later. Big thing to note here is if you have the capability of getting machine generated captions through your LMS or whatever software you're using, these actually do not meet 508 standards and require human editing and review. So having a script is going to help with those later as well. Having the script also helps you to record clear, organized lectures that stay on topic. When you're chunking your material into a short, condensed version, you can't stray from the topic and usually minimizes the amount of errors you have within your recording itself. Audible descriptions and annotation considerations. When you're filming, it's important to describe anything that is on the screen that you're drawing your attention to. If you say something like, "see here," an individual who has a visual difference will not be able to see. If you're making any annotations, you need to also ensure that you're verbalizing what you're annotating on the screen. Additionally, you're going to need to consider the color you're using in your annotations to make sure that they meet color contrast. Clear, crisp audio. When you're recording any audio, you want to make sure you're setting yourself up for optimal sound quality. If you have good audio, your students are more likely to be engaged. Two of the best options for quality audio are to use a headset microphone duo or a lavalier microphone. The benefits to those two options are that they get close enough to your mouth and pick up ample sound quality without a lot of echo. It is not recommended that you use your built-in computer microphones since these are generally not top quality and pick up a lot of ambient noise and room echo, which can be distracting during a lecture. Reduce any echoes or background noise. And if you have the ability to record in a room with carpeting versus hardwood floor, there will be less echoes. It's important to make sure you review a sample of your audio before you record an entire lecture to make sure it's clear. It's much easier to record a short clip and check for clarity than it is to record the entire lecture and then realize that you need to re-record for the clarity. So for those of you that were actually in the workshop yesterday, at the end of the workshop, we did mention that we were going to ask you to watch this video. And if some of you have, great. If you haven't, don't worry about it. We're actually gonna just see if those, did anyone watch it, I guess. Let's ask in the chat. Was anyone able to watch at least part of that video? I'm not sure. Or thumbs up. Okay, some of them. It's okay if you forgot.
It's okay.
Deal. Did anyone have anything that they noticed that we've already kind of touched on that maybe wasn't a good example of what was in that video? And I can do I can show you a couple of things on this video to help us see it, because it looks like a lot of people did not. So hold on one second.
We know it's a busy time of the semester.
Yes. So
This video will walk you through
so one thing, and I'm going to try to make this full screen, so bear with me for a second. I'm also going to share the computer audio, and we will. So right now, the first thing, if you didn't notice already, at the very bottom left, it tells us how long the video is. So the video is 15 minutes and 31 seconds. So right there, we kind of just touched on it. In general, we said videos should be chunked into how many minutes? Yes, it's definitely too long. It's not going to keep your engagement for as long. Yes, less than 6. Usually 5 to 7 is best. That's going to help to keep them engaged throughout it. We have actually added an SRT to it. I saw like one person actually watched it. Any other things that you noticed from the video when you were watching it? Crystal, was there a specific spot when you recorded it that I should jump to?
No, I mean, there definitely was a lot of places that I should have cut more. There's a lot of dead air. It wasn't as organized as it would have been if I had actually read a script. And because my image was not in it, I could have very easily read from a script and my students would have never known.
So, and obviously within some of, like, we were using a bad example. However, this is exactly what we were talking about. You don't want this on your screen, because if you're recording something with bad color contrast, obviously we were using it for an example, but this is an example of what you wouldn't want on your screen, so your students could actually see what was on the screen if you were wanting them to see what was on the screen. So let me get out of the share for, oops, 1 second, and I apologize. Let me get to, I'm going to make sure it's unchecked for the full video clip, because sometimes that makes it a little bit more grainy. So what would have worked better is if we actually had it chunked. So in these, we've actually chunked the video to very short snippets. All of them are, under 6 minutes. They're, less than a minute up to 5. But then this also gives the ability for everyone, if they need to review a section on top of that, this is going to be a quick way for the students to quickly get to the information they need. Because if you have an hour-long lecture video, now it's a little bit different when you're recording your synchronous just course and you have to post it. That's a little bit different. That's not just you straight lecturing. But when you're recording to lecture, you should be thinking about chunking those to help them stay engaged. And it's also going to allow them, when they, like we said, need to get back to something, they can quickly get to the point or the area that's going to be about that specific topic. So in all of these, we did include the SRTs. So that is, and we're going to go over what those are in a minute if you are unfamiliar, but that is the closed captioning that is at the bottom. And give me a second, because it's going to try to play. I've got a bunch of these and it is trying to play through them today. So now we're going to actually talk a little bit about the publishing piece before we go into this really, really bad example that we have. So some things to think about. Now, obviously, you don't have complete control over this. It's going to be what some of your universities provide. But in general, most of the players do have the ability to allow your users to control their experience, meaning that the user can control the player. They can pause, they can start, stop, pause, rewind the video, and it shouldn't start playing automatically. So that is one thing to think about. It shouldn't be an automatic play when they get to a slide. Additionally, they should be able to adjust the volume. So this is just an image, and this doesn't have all of those buttons. This is just to give you an idea, but they do have the ability in here to rewind it by clicking. So it doesn't necessarily need the rewind, fast forward buttons, but the playing of the video needs to be controlled by the user. And additionally, for transcripts. So transcripts are required for audio. So if you're only doing an audio recording and you have no video associated with it, some people actually voice over their PowerPoints. And if you're just adding the audio, you should have at least a transcript to go with that if they are going to each slide and listening to the audio. It allows the learners with auditory disabilities and auditory processing difficulties to access course content and provides multiple means of representation for all learners for studying, note-taking, and even search functionality. It also allows your English language learners or students working in chaotic environments access to the materials. Whereas a subtitle file, also known as an SRT, is required for anything that has video. And this is going to be, in essence, a synchronized transcript. So it's everything that's being said, but it's actually timed with where it happens in the video itself. If you are recording any video, including screencasts, you must include an SRT. Including a transcript also is suggested as an accompaniment to the SRT, but it's not required. SRTs allow learners with auditory processing difficulties or deafness to process recorded content. It provides multiple means of representation for all learners as well. Again, as a reminder, machine-generated captions and transcripts don't meet 508 compliance. Make sure you are reviewing them and editing them as needed. Crystal, did you have anything else to add on that slide? I just want to make sure before I...
No, but I have gotten a couple questions kind of direct to me about headsets, and do I recommend any type of headset? And I answered this in the chat, but I figure I'll answer it out loud too. Don't feel like you have to spring for a professional quality headset. I have found personally that headsets for gaming, such as like for Xbox or PlayStation, actually have really good sound quality. They're comfortable because people wear them for hours on end. And they're far cheaper than the professional headsets. And there's a question about why don't transcripts, machine generated ones, meet standards?
I will tell you.
That's a good one to talk about.
And I will say that I know that sometimes and the other thing is thinking about your own diction. So when you talked kind of about practicing your script and such, you will know, like if you do a recording, you might notice words you stumble on. That's going to help you to make sure you're not stumbling. But let's say you have an accent on top of that. Machine generated captions definitely are worse for those with accents, unfortunately. And I would say it depends on the software that you have provided to you, but they are often very, very inaccurate. And specifically for pedagogical content where it's like, you know, you're using a very technical term. I will even say we have, like we said earlier, we have Kaltura as our video editing and processing tool in Blackboard. I will say the word Kaltura and it will make it something totally different in my transcript and SRT. And so you have to be mindful that even though you're saying it and you think it's said clear, it might not pick up the word in which you are trying to say out loud. Yes, there are definitely a ton of errors, unfortunately, with the Zoom. Now, I will tell you with the Zoom, you can't edit those. And you can't, they'll download, if you download it from Zoom as a VTT file. It is slightly different. Like for us, for Kaltura, it does not accept a VTT file. We have provided you a link to this, or it's like a free website that you can do a conversion if you need the SRT version. It's called Happy Scribe, and you can use that to change it into an SRT. A VTT is still considered a synchronized transcript. It's just, it doesn't speak to all video software. So you have to verify if it will take the VTT file and you've edited it from Zoom, that's great. But if you need to convert it to an SRT, the actual Happy Scribe link that we've provided, and I've given like a short one-page how to do it if you're trying to make it into a transcript, because you can actually take your VTT or SRT, and we said, you know, the transcript's still going to help all of your learners and it's not required, but honestly, I will tell you, sometimes if I don't have the notes that I can get from the faculty, if I don't have, like, I can print off the notes from the slide, I might want the whole transcript and I can take notes off to the side and I have everything right in front of me. in case I want to note something as they're talking as well. And so you can actually take that and make it into a Word document that they can download as well as a transcript. So a couple different things that Happy Scribe can help you with. Unfortunately, dependent upon your university, will determine what you have access to regarding, you know, the ability to upload the captions. I know before, or when Zoom and everything was first happening, we did not have a machine generated caption from Kaltura. So what we were having faculty do was to edit their VTT file on Zoom, and they had to make sure they saved that first. Then they had to download it and convert it and then re-upload it to Kaltura in Blackboard. Now, Kaltura in our school at least has a machine generated caption. I would say it's at least as good, if not a little bit better than Zoom's, and they have the editing capability. So you'll just have to check with your university on what is available to you regarding the transcript and or subtitle SRT files. And the link for, yes, they do.
I got it.
Okay, and she's gonna get you the link for the ones there.
I was answering another question. There was a question, I think this is a good one to talk about. Beth asked, she said, this is for instruction, but what about student created content? Like my public speaking students recording their speeches, do I need to create a transcript? The reality is your students aren't working for the institution, right? Your students are working for you effectively. So they are not held to the same standards. And it's going to depend on, you know, the course too. You know, if we're talking a graduate level public speaking course, it's a little different. You know, they're preparing for that professional world than maybe your first semester freshman who this is their gen ed class. You know, certainly in a perfect world, would everybody publish that SRT? Yes. But students are not held to the same standard for you because the students are not receiving that 508 funding, you are.
Yes. So, and again, if they're dependent upon this, if they're doing it on YouTube, there will be machine generated ones, at least for them. If you do have a student with accommodations, check with your Office of Educational Accessibility or something of the like to verify if, you know, if they are like, if it's something where they're doing kind of like a peer review, there might be a situation where something might need to be provided for a student that has accommodations. So take that into account. If, you know, it's not necessarily that it's for every instance when the students are generating things, because you're not creating it as part of, you know, your course content. But in situations like that, you might need to verify who can help with that accommodation, because the students might not even have access to the same software that you have access to, which is another thing. So yeah, that gets a little tricky when we put into the student area. So now we are going to take, and we have provided in the resources, in the actual slide deck, in the notes section, a bunch of links. And we're also going to show you where to get the, we have a checklist that we've created to kind of go through some of these things too. I did forget to mention earlier, I believe I forgot to mention that if you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much still going on, as a reminder, we did create a short slide deck to kind of help walk you through how to prioritize what, if you're trying to change your whole course because you've already created it and now you're going back and trying to make these changes. How do you prioritize what you should really focus on first? And so this is kind of like a walkthrough of like, how are you going to make that plan? What are you going to do? And making a list of how to prioritize. And this is already, and we will be giving you the link to all of where these
I'm actually getting the link right now.
And it will bring you to the checklist, the Happy Scribe on how to convert to a transcript. That's not how to convert from a VTT to SRT. It's very much the same, though it's just not to the transcript itself. We have the link to the priority list, and we also have a link to the slides, and I'll talk about this last one in a little bit regarding the recording with PowerPoint. So we're going to look at an example. I'm just making sure. Okay, I was just making sure I didn't miss anything in chat. So we have recorded a really bad example of what videos sometimes could look like when you are not actually trying to meet some of these accessibility pieces. So keep in mind while you are, it's a less than a minute, keep in mind what we've already talked about and what are some things we would need to change to make this more accessible and meet accessibility guidelines. Give me just a second so I can optimize for the screen share.
time to hunt for and do our detective work to find the major accessibility issues. We've got font size, having a transcript or an SRT. Justified text is text that is a typographical alignment that is distributed across the entire page that makes letter and word spacing inconsistent. Over here, we have color to convey meaning. We're looking for using that built-in format that sat in a table. Got looking for URLs being underlined, and then making sure we're using a good font with the ally wave. And then underneath all of it, we want to make sure we're using that alternative text and making sure all of our colors meet color contrast standards.
Okay, so let me.
And I purposely made this bad. And it's funny because once you get in the habit of these things, I actually had to re-record it because I said things like on the roof of the building.
Yes, and so technically that's more what you're wanting to do. You're wanting to describe where you're referring to, things like that. So she had to re-record multiple times on that one. So what were some things, I know that we kind of were pointing out some accessibility items, but what were some things from the video itself that even if you were a typically abled student, that you would probably have difficulty with? What color contrast standards? I love it. Yes, and I saw a question, what about the avatars? The avatars are technically on this one, I mean, they should be marked with alternative text. Obviously for the video, I can't see that, but when I'm sharing my slide deck, let's say, because we should be generally sharing our content with our students too, we're gonna have to make sure that we have alternative text for any of those images, right? So in this case, did they really add anything to it? No, they were more decorative just to kind of put ourselves into the image. So they were marked decorative. Yes, vague, pointing over here. Oh, the video didn't play. I'm sorry, Dr. Groom. You will have access to this later. It was literally a one slide circling things. And yes, the outlining was very small.
And I purposely picked a bad color.
The color of it was not, very well contrast on all of the different areas. In general, with the slide embedded video, does that change the font size expectations? No. Generally, they should have the ability to make it full screen. So they have that player ability too. And that's going to help because even when you're using 24-point font, think about watching your slides as a video on, even with the 24-point font, that's kind of what we're talking about. You're going to also want to provide them the actual content as your slide deck or whatever, because if they might be listening to your video, but they might not be able to actually see it that way. They might have to be doing some other means later to either print it or to access it on something else so they can actually see it in a different context if they're not watching the video from a desktop or laptop. So you're still going to want to use larger size fonts when you are putting things onto slide decks for your videos. I know some people do also use Word documents. And when you're using a Word document, we're not saying 24-point font. It is a little bit different, but generally speaking, you're not doing, most people are not going to create like a 10-page Word document other than your syllabus maybe, right? Like, and I hope it's not 10 pages. That would be a lot, but but there would be, in cases of that, like we're not saying 24-point font, but if you're sharing a Word document, you're also going to, how sometimes it's more narrow on your screen, you can zoom in to make it more of your screen as well to help with that. So it's going to zoom into the document itself if you're sharing that. And I see there's a question about serif fonts. We generally use serif. This one that we have up here does this. We have like our sans serif is our actual title, and then the smaller text we have in serif font. So we are currently using, I think it's Roboto Slab as our actual title. So we're using two different font styles, and then for the actual content on the slides as well as the running title, we are using Verdana, which is a serif font. So these are a lot of things to think about. I know that like we have had to train ourselves when we are recording, because a lot of times you're like, yeah, and over here, well, what's important is to know where on the screen you are, what you're looking at, because even if they're using a screen reader to navigate, if you identify, okay, so for instance, when we're talking about PowerPoint yesterday, when I was, at the ribbon at the top, you're going to locate the whatever, the review tab. You're describing where you're going when you're doing it so that they understand those steps that you're taking. You're not just like up here or over here or see here, because that is very difficult. Or if you're looking at, like a table, what column are you looking at? So that they understand where your focus is. Annotations are great, but they can, if you are not describing them, you need to describe them actually in descriptive text for your SRT then. If you're not verbally expressing what context they should get out of you doing something on the screen, you need to provide another means of them getting that. So if you're not audibly saying it, you need to provide a text. It would be in brackets to let them know that this is what you were doing, almost like the action. So think about when you're watching a movie and there is another sound or something is happening and it adds to the context of the movie. It is actually added to the screen. So in essence, it's letting them know the context in which you are doing something. Does that, any questions on that? Because I know that that is a little bit confusing sometimes.
I'm going to follow up with what you said. And especially if you're just starting to try to make recordings, allow yourself some grace. You're going to make mistakes. Kristen and I still make mistakes. And so that's why we suggest, especially if you're recording over a PowerPoint or something, record one slide at a time. That way, if you make a mistake in the middle of your recording, you're not re-recording a whole lecture, you're just recording one slide. And so, but give yourself grace. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get it perfect the first time or the 50th time. There's definitely still times that I'll catch myself saying, as a sighted individual, over here, because I'm looking at it and I have to go back and re-record. So just allow yourself that grace.
And when you are recording, and it depends on what you have access to. If you are editing your videos, when we're talking about grace, we're also referring to it happens. It's okay. That happens in your face-to-face lectures, right? That's not going to, you don't want to, I mean, it's okay to have some of that within your recordings. It doesn't have to be perfection. While we want them to be the best they can be, it's okay to leave some of those things that happen. I mean, that you have to give yourself some grace. You will drive yourself nuts editing if you are trying to take out every little thing that happens. If you do have access to, yes, I do agree. Natural is good. Overproduced, not so. It doesn't, not so good in regards to them feeling like they can't connect to you the same way. It's like, kind of like the personalization principle. Like you're talking to them. It's not you're lecturing at them. It's more of that conversational. They understand that you're a person at that point. The other thing I was going to add to that is that when you are recording, if you do have access to editing software and you make a mistake, don't think about, if you have the ability to edit, don't stop and start all over again. What the suggestion would be to help you identify those within your editing software is to either pause for about 3 seconds, or the second suggestion would be to make a loud noise like a clap. And that's going to spike your audio to help you note that that's where you made the mistake and you now need to kind of look there for editing. So that's something to help you with your editing too later if you are editing your own videos. It is very difficult to get it perfect all in one shot, even when you're doing a 5 to 7 minute video, to be honest. Also, when you are starting to record, if you are, wait 2 to 3 seconds before you start speaking, to make sure that you are allowing yourself, you can cut a little bit if you need to at the beginning, but that way it's not like cutting into your starting to talk. Additionally, if you are recording multiple slides in a row, pause in between your slides, because editing, when you have when you're transitioning to the next slide, and if you have an editing need at that point and you are talking as it's moving to the next slide, it's going to be harder to edit your video because you're going to have to make sure that the video matches what's being shown on the screen too. So talk through your whole slide, and if you're not recording slide by slide, then you should make sure you pause before you start speaking again on the next slide, so the editing is a little bit easier for you. Any questions that you saw that we should address before I?
No, but to go with what you just said, additionally, and we talked about making sure you have that crisp, clear audio that an individual can turn up, turn down. Record just like 5 seconds of yourself saying something and make sure play it back to yourself. And I know everyone hates hearing their own voice. Play it back to yourself, make sure you can hear it, make sure it sounds crisp and clear. If you're not sure, ask a colleague or somebody, hey, do you think my audio sounds okay? Because it's much easier to adjust your setup if you've only recorded 5 seconds than if you've recorded several, an hour worth of lecture and you've got to go back and record all of that.
Definitely. So let me, and it's going to play the video, so give me a second. And I know we kind of already gave this, but we did include in the slide deck, just so you're aware, these are going to be, the W3C is actually the worldwide consortium. I can't talk today. Worldwide consortium. And this is going to be what WCAG kind of works hand in hand in. So this is a quick, like, do I need a transcript? Or audio, if you're doing audio only, requires transcripts. These are kind of those checklists, like when do I need captions? When do I need a transcript? This is a link directly to them, why automatic captions are not sufficient. If you're looking for more about like what needs to be in your audio descriptions, if you're adding something to it, something on the screen that's going to be like, if let's say you have a noise, like I have, for instance, engineering labs that we're sometimes doing. The student needs to understand what a noise is. We're going to have to add that in as bracketed text. So sometimes you need to add things to the SRT or the captions so that they understand this. And there is also an example of descriptive text here. And let me see what the question is to make sure.
She just said she's had to re-record. It sucks. I agree.
And then we also included the Happy Scribe, and this is how you can convert an SRT to a transcript. But like I said, you can also convert that VTT from Zoom if you are using Zoom to record into an SRT. You can also use the VTT and make it into a transcript as well. So that this, I will actually go here really quick just so you can see, and that's going to pull up there. I'm sorry, I'm going to go to their website too for you. So it's quick, simple. You literally put your file here. It can be an SRT or a VTT, and then you can choose what you want it to convert to. And when you select convert, it goes to your downloads folder. So you can make it into an actual Word doc for the transcript if you're changing it, or if you need the SRT and you've uploaded your VTT to here, that's going to be the conversion for the SRT for your player if it needs the SRT.
And as we're talking about, accessibility in audio and video and audio recordings, a lot of the things that are relevant help everybody. So when we're talking about using that quiet space, that helps all your students, whether they have a learning difference or not. So I know, a lot of institutions are kind of talking about the best ways to do those Zoom lectures, because most of us are sitting on Zoom doing lectures right now. These things are going to help all of your students.
And we know that not everyone has access to some things from their university. So we've tried to give you a couple options that are free. This online voice recorder is great to create a transcript. So we've actually used this and we'll play the audio. So like if we've done a recording and we need just the transcript of the audio, you can play it on your computer and record it. And then all you do is download the transcript once you're done. So that's one tool that is a great resource. Another one, a third.
I'll figure it out.
Okay, thank you. And the next one is actually for capturing your screen captures if you don't have access to do it another way. Screencast-O-Matic is a great tool that you can use. It also allows you to edit. One thing to note is the free version does include a watermark if you don't have the paid version, but it is a great tool. They have tutorials on here to help walk you through it as well. But this is going to be a great way if you do need another way to record. And for those of you that are interested in using a script and maybe making it more like a teleprompter, because unfortunately, when you're reading, if it's longer and it's there, you're going to have to be scrolling on whatever device it's on, right? So while you're trying to read your script. So if you want, there are two different options that we've provided. One is called Teleprompt Me, and you can enter your text and it actually will help to, and I'm going to stop that for a second, maybe. I'm going to block it apparently. You can actually use this auto scrolling teleprompter The other one is Prompt Smart. So these are two good options if you're recording that you can use to help you so you're not making as many mistakes and you have your script to help get you through that. And oops, I'm sorry. There's also, if you have live meetings and you have a student with you know, any need, you can also use this if you don't have anyone identified, though. There are real-time automatic captions or subtitles available through PowerPoint by using subtitles, and this actually walks you through how to set that up. One thing to note, if you are using this and you are recording a screen capture, that is part of your video. So you can't edit those after. So that is something to take into account, is that it will be part of your video recording. And so if you have the automatic live captioning going on, it's going to become part of the recording. You can't edit. And then when you have your closed caption SRT file or VTT file for your actual video, it might be confusing because they'll see in the video the actual live captions that were happening plus that. So if you don't have a student that needs it and you're doing a recording where it's a live lecture, you might not want to put them on. It's up to you. And also live captions are available in Google as well. So, and the Google ones I would say are a little bit more accurate in my opinion. And I think Crystal would agree with that.
Yeah.
So we also said we have a link to this digital content accessibility checklist. So this kind of goes through everything that we've talked about over the last 5 days. And the first one, the first section focuses specifically on your text or presentation. And these are going to go through each of the things and why they're important. And we've also included some of those links that we've talked about throughout the days if you need some of the how-tos or resources to help you through some of those things. So it literally goes through all of those for your actual presentation piece. If you don't see when you open this up, if you do not see the outline view, just at the very top left, there will be kind of like a little rectangle with 3 dots and I think 3 lines that signifies that it's a document. If you select show document outline, it will give you that ability to navigate. And that's again used by headers. And that's why we added those headers for both our typically abled as well as those with visual impairment or disability. So when we're talking about audio today, we're talking about you need to provide a transcript and you need to record clear audio. And this is the reasoning why, and there's the checklist links for you. If you're looking at video, if you're doing anything more like an animation or silent video, you'll need what's considered to be a descriptive text transcript. This is not as typical of a recording, so we didn't really focus on that today. But if you need some information on descriptive transcripts, we have provided some links for you here. So if you do any animation that doesn't have anything added to it in regards to like voiceover. And then the video pre-recording. So these are going to be like your lecture videos. So we've mentioned that it needs to be human generated. So you can start with those machine generated captions, but you actually have to edit them yourself later. You have to find and check with your university if you're not sure how you can gain access to doing that. Because unfortunately from university to university, it will differ. Also some links about how to, when you or to decide if you need the captions and all of how to do some of those things. The audio text description. So this is what we were talking about, providing that audible about the content elements that they need to understand. And if you don't have it, then you're going to add that text description into the actual SRT. And the transcript, like we said, is not required, but it is helpful. And that's also a helpful studying tool, I would say as well. And any annotation, don't forget to check your color contrast before you actually select the annotation color. And you are going to want to make sure that you're writing large enough when you are annotating as well. That's not like very tiny or, like we said, very thin lines that they can't see. And on that note, Crystal, did you figure out what was not being shared from here?
Yeah, I fixed it. It was only shared internal.
Thank you. Okay, this one, right?
Yeah, I don't remember which one it was. It's fixed though. And there's a question about editing your YouTube channel captions. Yes, you can do that. And then somebody says there's been a couple of questions about Screencast-O-Matic. And I've actually used that. I used it for a long time. It is the free version is limited to 15 minutes. There will be the watermark on the bottom. I believe it's left of the video. And the choice to turn off captions, I believe so. I feel like I should just grab a video out of my drive and double check.
I'm not positive either.
I'm not positive. I am navigating to a video as we're talking. I will tell you in just a second.
And we do have a document that if you are looking, and now this is specific to PowerPoint 365, so it might differ slightly if you have a different PowerPoint, but if you're looking to just do audio, or if you are, I mean, they do have the video of screen recording as well with PowerPoint. I would say most of us at least have some other tools that might work better. Like for instance, I personally find that Zoom is a little bit more intuitive with the accessibility piece of the SRT or the VTT file and my ability to edit it than for me to go and try to do it in PowerPoint itself. But if you are looking to do kind of like the audio only recordings, this is where that would be my suggestion. If you're doing slides and you just want audio, you can actually do audio only recordings. And we suggest to do it slide by slide. If you are then exporting it as an MP4, which is a video file though, it needs to have closed captionings versus just a transcript. But this kind of goes through that step by step. How do I record each slide and what it looks like, as well as we do have the section on how to export it as an MP4 file afterwards. If you are interested in doing that, for us, we can export it as an MP4 and upload it to our LMS as well. So that, you know, after you record, if you record slide by slide, again, that's going to give you the ability to quickly edit one little piece versus multiple. This should still, if you're exporting as an MP4 though, be in that 5 to 7 minute chunk. So think about that, because although you're only, you know, recording short chunks for each slide, if you export it as an MP4, it will be everything. And the more you have on your slides and the longer the slide deck, you're going to have a large file size. It's going to take longer to render. It's going to be bandwidth for your students to think about too. So that's also why the chunking is going to help, not just for the engagement, but for some of those technology pieces with all of us being remote as well.
I have the answer on the screencast-o-matic captions. Yes, you can turn them off. And the watermark is at the bottom left of the screen.
And I saw a question about how long will you have access to the materials on the drive. As far as I know, until if one of us get, you know, fired, I guess. I'm not kidding. But no, we're not going to like take away your access. It's open to anyone. So you can actually share the links with anyone that, you know, we have opened it so anyone can see it. It's not just from, you know, specifically registrants for the series or anything.
Yeah, and please,
retired, yeah.
Please feel free to share the checklist, send it to your colleagues. You know, it's I think, and Kristen might agree with you on this, like the more we can get everybody to help all of their students learn, the better. You know, start having, because I know in some departments there's lots of conversations about accessibility, and in some departments there's none. So maybe if you're in a department that there is no discussion, you know, be the person who gets that discussion started.
Yes, and I will also tell you, just so that you're aware, if you are trying to locate this digital content accessibility checklist, it's actually in all of the handouts. So at the very top of the handouts, we have linked directly to it, but because it's under the accessibility resource links, it's the first one on any of those handouts as well. We just didn't have a handout per se for this one specific to every, like kind of the bad example, good example, and work through example. So that's why we just linked directly to it into the today's folder.
Yes, I got it.
Okay, I was gonna say I could do it too.
Well, you might get to it faster than I do because I don't have it open.
This one, you come with the document accessibility checklist. Got it. Here you go. And I'm sorry, I can't make it accessible for you because Zoom doesn't let me.
Zoom doesn't let us, and we've been asking them to. We have asked.
We have. But yeah, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to reach out to us as well. And oh, I forgot to mention at the very end of this checklist, we have included the references that we, you know, so if you're looking for more things to kind of reference for people, if they're looking for, these are some of the studies, some of, you know, the different websites that we used when we were doing our research on a lot of this, because to be honest, we've learned a lot through this process as well, because we wanted to help others learn more, because we know that it's difficult, especially, you know, when you're not familiar with, it's great that maybe you know the terms of accessibility, but how do you actually put it into practice, right? Like that's the hard piece, is understanding how to do it, not just that it exists. So we wanted to provide you as much as we could in regards to references or resources that you can share with others as well.
And it is a practice thing. You will get better as you start doing it. You'll go back and edit something, and in 6 months you'll look at it and realize there's things you need to change. It's a practice thing. It is a skill. You're learning to do it just like your students are learning to do whatever you're teaching them. It's much better to say, I'm trying to be accessible, I'm working on it, than it is to go, well, I'm not even trying.
And we appreciate all of you joining us for this session, as well as, I see the Google question. So in the actual slide deck, and I will go out just so that we can get to that slide, and that was on the recording. And you will have this within the actual notes. We have linked to all 3 studies. The last one was similar to what they found in 2014, so I didn't actually mention it, but it's that the engagement peaks at 6 minutes and quickly drops after that. But we do have links to all 3 of those resources regarding chunking the material to help and users using the SRTs even when they do not have an auditory disability.
Other questions? We got just a couple minutes. We're sad we're not going to see everybody again on Monday.
You said this is going to be weird next week when we don't see all of y'all. You too.
Okay, well, I'll wrap it up a little bit as we wait to see if we have any final questions. Crystal and Kristen, thank you so much for putting this entire series together. I know that we have a lot of faculty members who have found it very valuable, and we really appreciate you empowering instructors to provide tools for students.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just am going to make this larger for you really quick. Somebody asked how they can contact us. Our emails are on the first slide of each of the slide decks. So feel free to reach out if you do have questions as well. And we appreciate you guys joining us.
And if you need to reach Hawks, you can reach us at marketing@hawkslearning.com. Once again, we did record this. We'll send you the blog link that has all the recordings and all the Google Drive links for all the materials. Okay, take care. Have a great weekend, everyone.